Hello and welcome to another episode of Ask the Expert. I'm Kayla McGowan, editor-in-chief, and today we're discussing standards, not mandates, in the restoration ecosystem. My special guest today is Nick Hindle. He is the CIO at PuroSystems and PuroClean and leads their technology, compliance, data, and AI strategies, supporting over 500 locations across North America with innovative solutions that drive operational excellence and competitive advantage. He previously served on the strategy team at Encircle, where he helped shape forward-thinking initiatives and market strategies within the insurtech space. Nick also spent a decade as CTO and CIO at NextGear Solutions, spearheading product development and contributing to the company's growth before advising SaaS companies through successful expansions and acquisitions. Please welcome Nick.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Kayla.
Yes, you're very welcome. Welcome to Ask the Expert. I'm so excited to dive right into this topic. We've kind of been talking about what we're going to talk about over the last couple of weeks, and we landed on this extremely important topic of standards, not mandates, in the restoration ecosystem. I know some people may think it's vague, but honestly, we're going to cover a lot today in this episode. And I want to just start off by jumping in. What are some of the core standards needed to enable secure and seamless data sharing across restoration platforms?
Big question, big answer probably. So if I ramble, somebody needs to give me a little nudge. But some of the core standards that we see today that are in place already, we see things like SOC 2 and CCPA, GDPR. These are all standard compliance elements that are applicable and that's really, really important. And that is, it helps people understand how to operate. And standards are there to help us operate in a best practice type of mentality. The difference between a standard and a mandate, from my perspective, is a standard generates this framework in which to operate and allows people to understand that framework and also how to operate. A mandate is do this. And that's really the major difference. There are benefits to mandates, but there are significantly more benefits with standards, I believe. Whoops. And I think some of the standards that we need to focus in on today are data objects. What are the objects that are flowing through the restoration ecosystem today? Such as, what is a job? How does that differentiate itself from a claim potentially? What is an address? We all think but what is an address? What is a loss? What is a customer? Who are the clients? And the different objects that are flowing around. And included in that, these are the important pieces. How do we manage and interface between these systems to ensure that these data objects are passed in a secure and reliable way? And that's the real critical element about this. If you're an insurance carrier, you want to ensure that your policyholder information is maintained and secured at all times, as it should be. And these standards will help all players within the ecosystem to interface efficiently.
Yeah, that was a great explanation. And I think you breaking down standards and mandates also is really refreshing, right? Because some people think standards may be the law and mandates really are, you have to do that. Standards you have a little bit more leeway with, and those can change, right? And so at the end of the day, security is always a big thing for all parties involved, whether you're a contractor, a carrier, even a consumer, right? They always are protective of their data, right? We all wear the consumer hat. And of course, we all probably here are like, what does that box say that I'm checking? What am I agreeing to, right? That's our mindset because we're in that world. Maybe not so much as our consumer, but we still need to protect it as the contractor and the carrier. So how can we encourage platform developers to adopt open APIs and common data objects without enforcing mandates?
So it's a meaty task ahead of us if we want to have this take place. I think the important thing is that we encourage platform developers to realize the benefits of working across a real ecosystem. We'll often hear people talk, and we did hear it a number of times at the beginning of this year at some of the conferences, about building a true ecosystem. There's a conversation, and then there's a reality. And I think to move from conversation to reality, this question is really important. What are the benefits? How can we encourage people? What is going to enhance a platform developer's desire to do this? And I think one of the common things is that if you're a legacy platform or a new platform, being able to interface to each other and enhance your value is actually quite critical. I would say for legacy people, some of the things that they need to take a good look at is the value of your organization is quite often not really defined by the number of licenses that you sell, but by the amount of data that you can acquire, which creates a residual revenue. And I think that's something that really needs to be embraced by some of the legacy people. Some of the more new players within the market are adapting this, or they're adapting to this mindset already. And therefore, they are building an API first approach to their platforms. And therefore, really, the benefit comes from, for a new platform coming into the space, the ability to interface into the legacy platforms. And from the legacy perspective, the ability to not have to rebuild everything and still build an even greater value to your business through actual more data being collected and creating that level of stickiness because you're working with platforms that people really desire to use, more modern AI technologies. You don't have to build that. You can interface to that, and that enhances your value as well, while also bringing in those new platforms into the ecosystem as well. And if we want an ecosystem, and if we are being truly honest with ourselves, there isn't one. There are two big players, and when they talk about ecosystems, they talk about their own ecosystem. And I understand that. I was there. You know, I understand this perspective. But also, in this day, in this year, an API approach is actually quite critical. The rapid development that is ongoing at the moment, the new technologies that are appearing, and this isn't just about AI. This is about other technologies that are appearing all the time. We need to ensure that there's a way for these technologies to be embraced by this market. And that's only going to truly happen if we have an understanding that an open API approach and an understanding of what the data objects are and how they interact and are secured is well known, well understood, and standards bring those about.
Yeah, and I would definitely say too, a lot of people who don't really understand how an open API works, they freak out because they hear the word open. And I think they think like, oh my gosh, all of my information is just going to be out there. But I don't think people understand the controls that you actually do have and how you can manage things and how it's still secure. And so you really talking about this, I think, does help because when businesses are in the process of implementing or building anything or bringing in another platform and someone mentions that word open API, sometimes it's like, nope, we're not doing it. That's just the mentality that we've actually unfortunately had in this industry for quite some time. And you mentioned there's two ecosystems, if you will, that aren't fully built out to work with the rest of our industry. And, the new players coming into the realm, they actually have the advantage because they can make their program or software platform, whatever, with that open API focus and forward. And so it's a little bit easier than it would be for maybe the legacy systems, as you mentioned, right? So what roles should legacy systems play in a modern restoration ecosystem build for the interoperability and innovation? I know you kind of mentioned it'll be a little easier for them if there's new platforms and softwares coming in with that, but how could they really help streamline this and kind of speed it up so that we're able to implement this sooner rather than later? I know we say we're going to work on this, we're doing this, and then, in 5, 10 years, we're like, oh, we're still working on it. What can we do to not be in the same position in 5 to 10 years?
Uh, I think the challenge right now is the realization that it's going to be good for your business, or thinking that it isn't going to be good for your business. Um, I think I actually mentioned this. There's the reality, and then there's the conversation. We have to move towards reality these days. And legacy systems are a tremendous element within our market, within the restoration space. A lot of these systems are backbone systems. I'll often refer to them as backbone systems. You live with them today, you've lived with them for a couple of decades. And these legacy systems need to adapt to be continuous as a backbone to this market. So I think that's the role that these legacy systems have to take on. The the rate of product development in a larger organization is significantly slower than a modern or a new organization coming into the market. It just is. Things that take days and weeks for one take months and quarters for another. And there's obvious reasons for that. There's obvious, things that have to be done. But at the end of the day, I think the best way for these legacy systems to maintain their relevance and to maintain that backbone capability within this restoration space is to embrace the idea of interfacing or integrating points to other systems. And when you do that, you enhance that legacy platform as an even stronger backbone upon which these other platforms are going to rely on. All of the estimating platforms, whether you're one or the other, that's not going away. And having APIs into them, which exist today, is tremendous. But beyond that, if you want your job management systems, if you want your scoping, if you want your estimating, if you want to be sharing this data, these APIs will have to be part of your roadmap and not just a document. It's documented on the roadmap. You've got to deliver it. I said at a conference earlier this year, if we're still talking about ecosystem integration this time next year, we all have failed. It's our responsibility to deliver it, not just PuroSystems, but the other franchisors in this group pushing for it. RIA is another element, but also the major players. If you want an ecosystem and the legacy platforms want to be part of that, I think it's really important that they embrace the idea of a standard, how to build these APIs, and reinforcing their position, reestablishing their value, and being that true backbone, that true infrastructure over which all this data flows. And I think that's the value for the legacy systems as we go forward into 26 and beyond.
Yeah, and I would definitely say too, it wouldn't be manual work either, right? This information that we need to share or have access to wouldn't have to say, oh gosh, I need to email Nick and he's got to pull something for me to send to me. No, this is all very accessible, right? And that's the whole point of this is to have a more seamless integration, ecosystem, and workflow, right? Because no matter who you are and where you are and what seat you sit in, there's a delay factor right now. There's a communication factor. And this would alleviate those problems that we're currently seeing. And to your point, in 2026, if we are still talking about this, something happened that wasn't the right thing that should have happened, correct? And so, you mentioning several key players, I mean, it's going to take a team effort. It's all of us. We all have to help push this along because that's what's needed and that's what's wanted. So I just really wanted to add that in is like, this is so important to the ecosystem. Um, there's a lot of manual work right now. And then if you can't get a hold of somebody, that's another delay, right? So there's these layers of delays that aren't working in our favors, and then that results in breakdown of communication. So why wouldn't we want to integrate something that, completes our ecosystem and delivers everything that all parties needs.
I agree. And here's the other component to this. You know, I work for PuroSystems. I care about what we're doing and what is important to our franchisees, and subsequently what's important to the policyholder, uh, the homeowner, and getting their issue resolved in the most efficient and affordable way. In addition to that, we also have corporate systems which rely on data, whether it's for CAT response or planning or any number of different things. And the ability for those existing systems to integrate into the corporate system that we want to enhance our data, to enhance our intelligence, to enhance our response and give the best service possible, that relies upon data being available to us and that data coming through an integration. So that's another element for this as well. We rely heavily on these legacy systems because they're tremendous systems, but we also need access to that data. And if we can't get that data, we need to move on. We need that data to be able to operate successfully. And so we need to have a partner that realizes that and provides that data to us in a way that can be consumed more readily than an Excel file being pushed to us every day and then decomposed and then loaded and so on. We don't want to go through that ETL process. We want a strong, tightly coupled integration with our partners, and that enhances our capabilities.
Yeah, and I would definitely say the more manual work behind what we do, the more open we are to mistakes or missteps. And that could be huge when we're passing back and forth Excel files and then our team is touching it and we're breaking it down to put it in our system. Human error, that's a factor, period. And this will alleviate a lot of that. But the time that we have
Mm-hmm.
given back with integrations and communications, you're not breaking down are extremely important in the busy world that we are in right now, right? And so, you know, it's hard to get things going. There's layers of things, as you mentioned, whether it's approvals or testing or whatever the case may be. But as long as we're working on it and working towards officially getting there, and not just talking about it, we're ahead by doing that, right? We know it's going to take time, but we need to see progress. Progress is better than sitting down next year having the same conversation and being exactly where we were 365 days later. You did mention AI a little earlier, and it kind of wanted me to pivot to that realm just a little bit. So how can AI-driven innovation be accelerated through the standardization, data, models, and communication protocols?
Yeah, this has anybody heard of AI? It's new. I think everybody is living and breathing with the concept of AI and sorry, not the concept, the reality of AI, but then also the concept of what it can do to enhance your business, whether you're a technician in the field or an insurance carrier wading through a huge amount of data. When we create standardization, I think this is fairly well understood. But when you have an AI model that is trying to learn, unstructured data is going to be significantly more difficult to actually decompose, parse out, and then create rules and then meaningful results than more structured data. Also, I think people have probably heard this phrase, but hallucinations from AIs and so on. When there's standards, hallucinations are reduced. And the reason that they're going to be reduced is quite simple. There are standard objects. It knows how to operate against these objects far more efficiently and far more consistently than unstructured data that could bring in a nuance of data that it's unsure of and then generates a result that was unexpected. I I will say this when it comes to AI. AI does not relinquish your responsibility to think. And it's critical that AI is seen as an enhancement to your capabilities, not a replacement for your accountability. And that's really critical. If an AI gave you an estimate that was clearly wrong and you submitted it and it was rejected, it's not the AI's fault. You should have reviewed it. You still have that level of accountability. And we might only be using that as an example, but that's really key. So data objects, standardization around what these objects are, how they're generated, is really key for AI learning. Additionally, with data objects, the origin of the data should also be well known so that you can identify if there's an origin point that is skewing results so that you can start to eliminate those, or the AI can learn to start to eliminate or account for that skew. And that's a really key thing. So when we have structured data, our AI capabilities are going to be more robust and consistent. Really the bottom line.
Yeah, and I would definitely say to your point, it's an enhancement, it's a tool, it's not a crutch. It's not going to replace our skill set, right? We have to utilize our expertise and technical knowledge to make sure that the data we are getting, whether it's an estimate or maybe it's a source you're using to cite or whatever the case may be, you still have to validate it. There's still a human validation variable there that just is never going to go away, right? Because there's still going to be things that we can't really train AI because things move a little bit faster than that. And I think for people to understand that it's a tool, just to your point, it helps enhance your job or what you're working on, but it does not replace you. It doesn't replace your mind. It doesn't replace the human aspect of things. If we utilize it that way, it's not as scary. I think it's starting to scare people, but if you leverage it properly, just like we leverage all of the platforms that we use every day. It hasn't replaced us, and they do still have hiccups, right? AI is no different. And I think utilizing it in the right way is how we have to get ahead, not say, "Oh, I don't know how it works," or "Hey, it's giving me wrong information." No, you still have to validate it. You're still a responsible party. There's still accountability on your end, right?
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, we operate with insurance. Franchisees are all operating within the insurance space. Insurance is a highly regulated environment, uh, as it should be. So that consistency is really critical. I don't think today anybody could get away with saying, well, ChatGPT said it was good, therefore it must be good. I can well assume that an exec from a major carrier would go, you didn't look at that. You didn't review it. No, ChatGPT did that for me, so you should accept it. He's going to come down hard and say, that's a bit of a foolish statement, so don't do that. And so there is a place for AI. And I think one of the exciting areas, and I think that this is where this standardization is going to really play well, is around scoping and estimating. As we do scope to estimate and estimate to validation and getting approvals, that workflow is um, quite cumbersome at the moment. It's heavily reliant upon people, heavily reliant on documentation. Whereas if you implement the AI capabilities around image recognition, OCR, and reading of notes, voice capture, combining this with good property data, this will generate a far more robust and applicable estimate than ever before. And then when that estimate is being generated and then being validated, it's likely to go through that process far more efficiently. But at the end of the day, somebody will still have to take the notes, take the photos, make sure that the scoping is accurate. They'll have to scan it, make sure it's good. Estimates being generated, again, will need to be reviewed and make sure that they're good. So there's a big play with AI. And I think the message is good data in will produce better AI results out.
100%. And this will help the ecosystem. It's already helping it in a sense for those who are leveraging it. And I think at the end of the day, the human checklist is not going to go away. It's just not. I mean, it's never going to go away because just as there's human error, there is AI error, right? And so we have to recognize that and make sure that we're also not going to a carrier or even to our customer and saying, "Oh, hey, ChatGPT told me this, so it must be right," right? Um, and because then it's who's the professional at that point. I think that's also another thing that, we're the professionals. Yes, ChatGPT may have said the sky is green, but we know that the sky is blue. So let's fact check that and then retrain our AI to say, "Hey, no, that is not accurate." Because it's a continual evolution, right? We still have to train our AI when we're using it and it's giving us the data we need. But if it's giving us data that's invalid, we should correct it. And so moving forward, that won't be an issue. It's not going to tell me the sky is green again, right? It's going to tell me it's blue. And so we are continually helping AI evolve. We're part of that driving force, because it can't give us the proper information to utilize if we're not helping it in the background. So there's a lot that goes into our ecosystem: AI, human aspects, resources, standards, mandates, all of that fun stuff, right? What governance model would best support the evolution and adoption of this ecosystem-wide standard?
Um, so let's be honest, there isn't one today. And the reason is that we're talking about this. And I think um, let me try and answer it in a slightly different way. Um, who is responsible for making sure that we have good standards? I think is a question to ask. For me personally, I have great faith in RIA and what it's doing. And there's been changes, and there's been change in the leadership there. And with Jeff Moore, I have great promise for what RIA is going to do in the coming years. And there's a tremendous group of individuals available to RIA to help create uh, the right set of people to take a look at this. Now, if we set up lots of committees, I often like the phrase death by committee. Okay. But I do think there's a role where RIA and the major players, and by players, I mean the franchisor, okay, and other key restoration professionals to help define what this governance structure should look like. But I do think for today, RIA plays sort of a cornerstone position and builds out, a focus group to help drive this forward before we get into the committee and things are a bit more controlled in a rigorous way. I do think we've got to ramp up quite quickly. And that's why I say, let's get a focus group together and drive this. Then once we've reached a particular point, then let's get to the committee stage and start to put more and more controls in place. But I do think that's where I would look to see governance sort of emanating from. It's our restoration organization. They need to be part of the solution here, I think. But I would also expect them to take input from people like carriers. What is it that they expect to see? Because we have to serve them. We have to serve the homeowners and the policyholders, carriers, and the restoration professionals. And if we want a robust approach to having this delivered and managed, I think this full circle needs to be accomplished with a center point, a hub around people like RIA and key drivers from the restoration space.
Yeah,
Longer answer than perhaps you might have expected.
no, no, that was really good explanation because I was just going to add they have a carrier advocacy initiative, and I think this goes hand in hand with that, right? Because it does involve the carrier, and it's also about the consumer, but also about the contractor at the same time. So we're all on the same page. And with having one particular force maybe driving that forward with the voice of other contractors, both independent and franchisees, that makes a huge difference because they are the Restoration Industry Association. And so they're able to be that unified voice, but have those different perspectives, and help drive, exactly what we're talking about forward. And what better way to partner it with the carrier advocacy? I think that's another thing, right? Um,
Yeah, I actually had such an, I think it's really important. Technology is moving really fast. It's really moving forward. We like to say at PuroClean, hey, we're on the move, but which is true. But we are keeping up with technology. The technology landscape is moving forward at a tremendous pace right now. It's not just Pure systems that are on the move. We are chasing this technology landscape like never before, and I think it's really important that it's represented well from the restoration space. And if we want to embrace these technologies, we need to understand how we can embrace them in a secure and robust way through standards that allows them to integrate incredibly well and accelerate the adoption of these technologies into our space. And again, it's not about just PuroSystems or any of the other franchisors. At the end of the day, homeowners are what matter the most. We serve the homeowners, we serve the carriers, and we want the best for them. And technology is just one way to serve them well.
yeah, and I would definitely say we want to be the Netflix, not the Blockbuster, to break it
Oh
down.
gosh, yes.
Right. We saw that
Yeah.
happen. We saw the breakdown, and this is no different, right? Blockbuster refused to pivot. They wanted to stay the way they were going to stay, and Netflix moved from sending you DVDs in the mail to live streaming and all the other fun things that they have going on now, right? I mean, we've seen how they've grown. And that's no different for us, right? We have no choice but to move forward, or we will end up like Blockbuster. And that's how I think about it. Every time we're talking about technology, I'm like, we've seen it happen, right? So let's not be
Yeah.
that one that doesn't get with the program here.
Yeah, exactly. So when you pick up your BlackBerry or your Palm OS, which you don't, because they didn't adapt, as you said. And I like this concept. If you will not change, you will break. And think about the examples that you just given. They broke because they didn't change. And if you're an incumbent that will not change, frankly, the market will move.
Yeah.
You will break, and it's tremendous. That's actually a great thing because I really believe in Cotality and in Verisk to be able to really push technology forward and embrace the other platforms that are here in our space for the betterment of all restorers. I think there's a great opportunity right now. I think the question is who's going to embrace it.
I agree 100%. There's somebody has to step up to the challenge, right? And I think, for yourselves, you guys, just like you said, PuroClean is always on the move. And, it's not just going to take PuroClean, it's going to take everybody in our industry to help push that forward. Everybody has a great spot in this industry. They have a voice. And any pain you're feeling or, breakdown in communication or processes or what have you, chances are the person next to you are they're going through that as well. And so, we have to help, to your point, move it forward in order to get to where we want to be. And we'll get left behind. If we don't, we will get left behind. We are one of the last industries, I feel like, to really embrace technology in its full capability and capacity. And we're still having growing pains, but that doesn't mean it's not possible. And we'll get there. But I think we're having these hard conversations, and it's not just us having these hard conversations, but other people we know, other professionals in the space. RIA is having those conversations. I sit on a committee there, and there's a lot that is talked about there. I know that Mark Davis sits on the board as well, and there's a lot of movement at the board level. And so with us at the franchise level or even independent level, if we're there embracing technology and we're showing people, maybe our neighbors or carriers or whoever, that you can properly embrace it, we will push the change forward. It's just going to take time, right? Time that we unfortunately really don't have. We need to kind of speed it up just a little bit, but we'll get there. I have faith. We covered a ton today, Nick. Is there anything else you'd like to add before we sign off?
Um, I, I, so I do want to say this, and I think it's applicable for not just PuroSystems, but for many in the space, in the positions that both CJ and I sit. Um, we look at all of the softwares that are out in the space. We love to see it. We get excited about it. And the critical piece for us is there's a lot to look at, but which are the ones to use? Which is quite important. There could be 100 players out there, but which are the 5 players that you actually need on your team? So we are doing far more rigorous vendor management than we've ever done before. We call it our SPAR program, but we are we are leveraging this approach to having a look at software, all vendors, to be honest. It's not just software vendors, everything from equipment vendors, chemical vendors, and services and so on. But we are going through this to ensure that we provide the best to our franchisees. We don't want, some new software that's been on the market for 2 weeks that isn't robust, that doesn't meet standards around things such as CCPA or SOC 2, and hasn't really got a footprint, can't support its infrastructure. We want to weed these out. So we ourselves have standards. We are defining our standards through our SPAR program. We're not just talking, we're implementing it ourselves. And I think that's a really key thing. We as an organization are approaching this with a standards mindset. We want to work with partners that operate to the standards that we expect. It's not just about security and compliance, but it's availability and so on. And when we do that, those vendors, those partners become true partners. There's no ambiguity in the conversation. We need these 5, 6, 7, 8 items, and if you meet those, that's the standard. We implement standards ourselves in this framework for this very same reason. Our franchisees deserve the best, and we want to provide them the best. And we define the best through defining standards, not a mandate.
Yes, 100%. And I have fortunately had the opportunity to talk to both you and CJ about SPAR. And it just, it's not just standards at that point, it's also accountability, right? If you're going to be part of this program, there, yes, you're upholding these standards, but you're also an accountable individual that we trust, right? And so I'd love to have you back on so we could talk about SPAR and maybe set the standard for the industry and show why it's so important, what made you guys implement SPAR, and how this is no different than implementing what we just talked about, an ecosystem, right?
Definitely.
Change. Change is key, change is inevitable, and the change that we're seeing with both your SPAR program and talking about the ecosystem is to help advance us forward. It's always to move forward, if you will. Thank you so much for your time today, Nick. I can't wait to have you back on. And for all of you watching, thank you for tuning in, and we will see you on the next episode of Ask the Expert. Take care.